Good evening, everyone. Happy Monday. We're coming at the end of August, and now we are also getting into the 1st of September. So hopefully y'all had a good weekend, a restful weekend, or an exciting weekend, whichever you prefer. Just go ahead and confirm that you can see me and hear me, because actually I don't have YouTube on. So I can't confirm myself if I can hear myself. I just know that the microphone configuration works. Good. Confirmed by my wonderful, remarkable Prof and Baron. And he also says, looking forward to your wisdom, my Tenuviel. Yeah, we'll be talking about elf women. Actually, one elf woman in particular, of course, as you saw from the thumbnail. And then we had a great quote of Galadriel by our wonderful friend Al. But I forgot to pin it because I think he posted it a little early and just disappeared. So, I mean, if you want to put it up again, Al, that'd be great too. And we have Ace. Welcome for about half an hour. Good to have you for half an hour. And then I'll see you a little bit into your future. You'll see me in the past. And then also Final Fantasy 12 and Marvelous. Oh, Marvelous. That's how you say your name, I bet. Yeah, I was saying it separately. Marvelous. And sound is engraving. Visuals are visualizing nicely. I just hear some crickets in the back. So you might hear some frogs and toads and crickets in that window well there. Thank you, Big Al. We'll start with that. Galadriel, most beautiful of all the House of Finwë. Her hair was lit with gold as though it had caught in a mesh the radiance of Laurelin, which is the golden tree of the two trees, Talperion and Laurelin. Talperion is the male who issues silver light, and Laurelin is female who issues the golden light. And Private Eye says, just to be clear, I still don't know much about Tolkien. I just finished Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers. I'm reading Return of the King in a few months. Well, that's good. Actually, I have with me Fellowship and Return of the King, because there are two places I want to read out of for when discussing the very nice different things regarding Galadriel. Some very inspiring things about this character. Yeah, there you go. There you go. And then K.R. Reka or Rika. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. I'm going to say Rai as if you were to pronounce it Japanese. I was about to say pronounce it Japanese, but they don't pronounce the R's, but there you go. So you are, sounds working pretty well. Good. Might have to drop out at some point. Okay. Well, hopefully you can catch the replay. Okay. So, I had a topic I wanted to talk about, but I was listening to a couple videos regarding Lord of the Rings. Actually, one was a really insightful analysis of Fellowship of the Ring, and then I just got into this, a bit of inspiration, wanting to talk about Galadriel, particularly because it's not really a response to the final trailer of Rings of Power, but I would say out of everything with what might be going on with Rings of Power with Amazon, I think the person who will be skewed the most is Galadriel, because she's an actual character. We have Isildur. I talked about him a few weeks back. He will be skewed too. But it's really important to talk about the good things about Galadriel, the very important things about this character. Of course, we know her to be the elf, the elven lady of Lothlorien, who we see in the Fellowship of the Ring. But she has some history. Now, the features or the traits or the virtues that I want to talk about regarding this character really is emphasized in the Lord of the Rings, in the stories, with the Fellowship of the Ring, when she meets the Fellowship, and then also at the end of the War of the Ring, when Aragorn is heralding, not heralding, but leading the charge, the men of the West to the Black Gates of Mordor, and what she's doing in that point of time, and just overall really good characteristics. Now, the reason why I want to talk about the more inspiring characteristics of this noble elf woman is actually a direct response, not to the trailer, the last trailer of the Rings of Power, but more a very specific point in that trailer. I didn't watch all of the trailer, but I wanted to watch enough, like that little bit where so that I'm right to confirm that this is what the trailer said. I don't want to hear everything in edgewise if I need to confirm, my opinion to be valid. But she says in the trailer, or actually, I think Al was the one to bring up the name Galadriel, because even if she's depicted as she would have been in the Second Age, they're not going to run with who she is, with generations leading into the Third Age and stuff like that. Okay, so that's me rambling. Let me be very specific. So in the trailer, in the final trailer of the Rings of Power, I had heard, and then I did see confirmed, that this Elrond, or as people say, Elrong, he says, Galadriel, you've fought well, or you've fought long. It's time to put up your sword. And the response to that, Galadriel's response to him saying that to her is, well, without my sword, what would I be? Without my sword, who would I be? And it's a very interesting set of words there that Galadriel would say, because she's way more than a sword. She's way more than a warrior. Yes, she fights darkness at several different stages of her life. Throughout the whole history of elves and men, she contends with darkness in the form of evil, prideful elves, in the form of Morgoth's, resisting Morgoth's forces in different areas of the First Age, as they're trying to occupy different areas of the First Age on Middle Earth. And actually, it's not technically Middle Earth in the First Age, but I'm not too big on the lore. I just know a little bit. Evil, wicked elves, prideful elves, very strong, valiant, but prideful elves, the forces of Morgoth, the forces of Sauron, and including, if not Sauron himself, at least very much his influence in places like Mirkwood, his fortress in Dol Guldur. Wait, how do I pronounce that? I wrote it down somewhere and I can't find it. Oh, Dol Guldur. Yeah, I think that's how you say it. I hope I pronounced that right. But so anyway, she has withstood against evil in aggressive ways. But just to put a sword in her hand and to say that is all that I am is very much a, dare I say, gross reduction of who this woman is. So we're going to talk about this woman. So as the stream says on the thumbnail, and then also on the title, it's Galadriel is more than a sword. She's better than a sword. Now, just a sidebar. I've been dating Professor Geek for a little over 2 years now, so his knowledge of things has just been inputted in my brain, and so now I'm thinking a lot like he thinks. So bear with me, but I have to say this. Very interesting thing that a woman would say, without my sword, what am I? I'm not saying women can't brandish their swords and wield them in battle. I'm not saying there's no place for that in fiction or in something like high fantasy. Of course, we see the most famous example is Eowyn of the Rohirrim. But it's weird that a woman, especially an elven woman, would say that, because a sword, for all intents and purposes, is a very masculine weapon. It's not that a woman can't wield a sword. I'm more hand-to-hand combat myself. I just let me use my knuckles and my fists. But swords are cool. They're fun to look at. They're fun to, it's sword fighting and sword play is fun to watch. But symbolically and structurally, obviously, it's a masculine character. or it's a masculine weapon. And so for a woman to say, I mean, I'm kind of playing with the words here, a little with a little bit of tongue in cheek, but well, it's weird to hear a woman say, "Without my sword, what am I?" And I'm not being crass when I say that. That's actually the sword is a symbol. Actually, I think even the professor used the Saturday morning cartoon examples of Thundercats and He-Man. The sword is that masculine identity. And so it's funny when a woman says that. I know people could say, "Oh no, women can use swords." I'm just saying it from uh, in a place of language. It's weird for even a woman to express it that way. So that's the first thing. And this is storytelling. This is fiction. I can say as much. So there's that first thing. We'll get into, let's go to the chat, and then I will just do a little short lecture on Galadriel, who she is, and then and we'll talk amongst ourselves. All right, so just a real quick thing. Oh, it looks like you are talking amongst yourselves. Okay. Prof says nothing wrong with that. As far as I'm thinking like him. Yes, it's true. When you spend time with someone, you're very close to the brains kind of mesh. I mean, I hope I influence him somehow. Yeah, Big Al. So many jokes you must resist because I'm trying to still trying to keep up the class as well. So Private Eye says, a phrase of a movie I've forgotten that the name of that always struck me is the knight who tells the princess who wants to learn to use the sword, "I fight so you don't have to." I mean, there is a bit of significance there. And actually, we're going to talk about the significance of either Galadriel fighting in battle or elves in general. All right. Yeah, samurai sword fights. Yeah, very interesting. All right. Oh, is it? I didn't know if the Rings of Power intended that. The double entendre is definitely intended. You don't make a statement like that by accident. I could be. I'm not gonna. I'll just speculate, but again, I want to be surprised if that's the case. All right, so let's talk about uh, first. Just as a way to begin, Amazon's Rings of Power is by that statement alone. Without my sword or without it, what would I be? Now, my short answer is Galadriel, you are so much more than a sword. You are so much more than a warrior. Many, many things that make Galadriel very interesting and also inspiring. And I think Tolkien really worked with this character in very interesting ways. Now, before I talk about her traits and her good, virtuous deeds and the virtue of her character, we do have to bear in mind that Tolkien, especially with his works and his stories in the Silmarillion and Unfinished Tales, and anything that would be a compilation of his stories, like in an anthology. He also wrote letters about his works and different things like that. If you're not familiar with the history of Middle Earth or the history of the Eldar days or Arda, where the Valar reside, if you're not familiar with the very ancient days of this Earth Ea, you might think it's very easy to think this, but you might think, oh, elves. If I've seen the Peter Jackson films, elves are beautiful. They are radiant. They are angelic. They are beams of light, and it's true. They're very tall. They're very beautiful. They have this inner radiance about them. The culture about them, the way they build their houses among the trees, the way they preserve nature and the woods. It is very beautiful. It is very noble. But in the ancient days, while there were many noble, virtuous elves and many great heroes among that race, there was also, just as it was with men, like the early high kings of men, just as it was with men, the elves suffered an incredible amount of pride and indignation, especially against the Valar, especially against um, uh, Valar, and they're not helping them as they would see fit. The actions of Morgoth really intimidate them and frustrate a certain family of elves. Really, if you're curious, it's this family of elves called the Noldor. There are different not races of elves, but there are different families of elves. They're from different houses. There are elves that are more for the night or for the ocean. There are elves more for the woods, and they have specific names for their cultures and a couple, a few different languages and stuff like that. But the elves, as good as they are, as far as among all the races of the earth in Tolkien's mythology, a lot of them suffered tragedy. Not Yes, they suffered tragedy at the hands of very wicked and evil beasts and people like Sauron and Morgoth, but they also suffered tragedy by their own hand, of their own race. There were two major kinslayings between elves, elves versus elves, not elves versus men, not elves versus dwarves, but there was a kinslaying, monumental kinslaying, I think twice in the history. And a particular family of elves directly uh, insult the Valar, rebel against the Valar, and leave paradise. Essentially, they leave they are exiled out of the earthly paradise where these gods and goddesses abide. And while Galadriel didn't partake of many of the sins of this family of elves, the Noldor, she actually did go into exile. She actually hated the top revolutionary. Well, he's not revolutionary. He actually just he said, "Join me against the Valar and let's go seek lands into Middle Earth and stuff like that." She did not like him. This is Feanor I'm talking about. Um, it's a long history, so I have to keep it short. She did not like him, but she was very much enticed by his words to explore the untamed lands. When she was very young, she was tall, strong, and independent. And even though she contended with this one leader elf who suffered a lot of pride, he had a spirit of fire in him. She didn't like him, but she was still engrossed by his words. Like, I would like to explore these untamed wildernesses, of Middle Earth. I would like to see what domain I could keep for my own and preserve for my own. So she actually, through this rebellion, goes away, leaves paradise, and she and her brothers go. Galadriel and her brothers go, and her father actually repents of the rebellion before it's too late, and he seeks repentance. He seeks pardon. He asks for pardon from the Valar. He's redeemed. He's pardoned, and he stays in this paradise, Arda. She does not. She goes, and she doesn't want to, even though she knows the exodus is wrong. It's coming from a very wicked motive. She can't see herself as like a suppliant. She can't see herself as a vassal for pardon. She's too proud in her youth, so to speak, in her elven youth, to suffer pardon, as much as she disagrees with the leader of the rebellion. So all this to say is, when Galadriel is very, very young, there we go. All this to say is, when Galadriel is very young in her years, she's independent, she's proud, and she seeks to tame land for herself, or to seek things to rule over herself, and she does it in a very proud way, and not so great way, not so virtuous way. Now, in the events following, and into the events of the first age, she continues to do good. It's not that she slips into doing evil. She doesn't become evil. She knows it's important to resist evil. She, with her brothers or with her cousins, or even with Celeborn in the future, She'll work to resist the evil of Morgoth and, of course, eventually Sauron. So she doesn't slip into evil. She doesn't become evil. She doesn't, certainly as we see, she does not become a tragic figure like a lot of the proud elves. But she does have, she does suffer with pride. That she struggles. That's her fault of her earlier days. She struggles with pride to the point actually where I didn't know this because it's been a long time since I've read through the text, but she actually there is a ban placed upon her where she cannot journey back to the west. Very interesting. I did not know that, but the Valar, the gods, place a ban where she cannot journey to the west, and her response is, well, I don't plan on going to the west, and it very much as I've said before when talking about Tolkien, the revering the West is like revering the divine. That's the order, that's the higher order of things. The West is a very spiritual symbol in Tolkien's Middle Earth. We see it with Faramir, when he and his men in the secret cave, in his secret hideout, look to the west and look to the west window as a kind of it's symbolic of prayer. It's symbolic of spiritual reverence of the divine. So for the elves to move away from the west in exile, going to the east, that's actually symbolic breaking away from the divine. Many of the elves are wicked in this scenario. Many are slain for their arrogance and for their pride, and many tragedies unfold with this rebellion. But Galadriel, as we see over time, she is resisting evil in her own way. So, and then actually we see, well, how did she get to go to the Grey Havens and sail to the Undying Lands? Well, the ban on her to journey to the west, that was lifted when she resisted the One Ring. We see that famous scene in the movie, and it's also in the book when she's transformed to this very powerful, very very high. She's taller beyond measure, and she's brighter, and she's the most beautiful being in the world. But we see her form. Frodo sees her form as she would be, this terrible, beautiful queen, as she would be had she taken the ring for herself and destroyed Sauron herself. And then we see that goes away. That image goes away. She becomes normal again. She becomes her normal form. That's symbolic of, no, this is who I am. I'm resisting the One Ring. And because she's resisted the One Ring, the Valar lift their ban and she can go to the west. So she does have this period of pride and then this period of redemption, and she displays virtue and power, especially in the events of the War of the Ring and the Fellowship of the Ring getting into the War of the Ring. So there is that. And then we're going to be talking about really how she is way more than a sword. So, all right. So, with her pride and redemption out of the way, we do see this elven woman as a lady of light, a lady of character, a lady of virtue. So I'm going to actually go through a bullet point of different things that is quite remarkable, and to really lay it bare why that statement, "Without my sword, what am I?" Really, how much of a disservice that statement is to the character. Let's start with that first reason why it would be a disservice. Well, when you have an elf maiden or a lady or any elf, but we're talking about Galadriel. When you have an elf maiden, a lady of power and height and prestige, needing a sword to define herself, what you ineffectively or indirectly do is actually reduce her to mortality. Interesting about the elves, part of the sacrifice of the elves that battle, the battles they have in all the ages of Middle Earth, is they're immortal. They can go back out to the undying lands of the West. They're immortal. But because they have this need, this pressing need to resist evil, that is really trying to have dominion over all the lands that they love. They love Middle Earth. They will fight to protect and preserve Middle Earth, whether that is for their own kingdoms with their own families, or for the different races of Middle Earth. It's a wonderful sacrifice. We see the wonderful sacrifice of these elves in battle and war, because if they weren't fighting, they would preserve their lives to the end of the world, to the unending of the unmaking of the world, as I think it's phrased. And so being in a battle as an elf, you're pretty much, death isn't certain, but you have a huge chance of being mortally wounded and dying. And your spirit will be carried to the halls of Manos or Mandos. I can't remember his name. So the spirit of the elf lives on, but the body is deceased. With men and the race of men and their wives and their sons and daughters, of course, time limits the race of men to something like death. And we see that. And men suffer a different kind of sin involving death, as we see with the men and women of Numenor, the kings of Numenor in the Second Age. But going back to the elves, if you're an elf in battle, you have a huge chance of really becoming mortal. You're more. It's kind of like your immortality becomes mortality. And so for Galadriel, of all people, an elf maiden, to have need for a sword, she's no different than the race of men. She's no longer distinguished from the race of men. Again, it's not to say that the elven warriors cease to be elven, but the issue of mortality, that chance of being fatally wounded, is there. It wouldn't be if she did not fight with a sword. She would live on. So the fact that there's no distinguishing her with a sword in hand from a warrior of the Rohirrim, that's kind of diminishing who she is as a character. So that's the first thing. All right. And let me just say, I do have this on my notes. Battle is the one thing that will terminate the life of an elf. Nothing else. I don't think elves suffer pestilence. I don't think they suffer sickness because of their healing abilities, but I'm not sure about that. But they can suffer a stab from a spear, or an arrow or something like that. So anyway, that is that. So the reduction of Galadriel to mortality. That's the first example of disservice from this line. The second is the lack of immense power that Galadriel should already have by the Second Age. Now, the accounts of her using her power is really only highlighted, again, from what I have read. I could be completely wrong. But the accounts of using her immense power is definitely present in the Fellowship of the Ring, in The Hobbit, when she and the White Council, with Saruman, with Gandalf, and with herself trying to, or working to expel the presence of Sauron, away from the north in Mirkwood, where he has his fortress in Mirkwood. And they do succeed in expelling at least his spirit from that wood. So his influence is still there in the north, but his presence isn't. He has to flee back to Mordor in the days of the Hobbit. So she's very powerful. She with her comrades, these wizards, of course, before Saruman becomes a traitor, she's up in arms and has the ability to expel the Dark Lord himself from this northern fortress. That's a demonstration. It's a rare demonstration, but it is a demonstration of her immense power. She has immense power to do this. We, of course, see her potential for even more power, even greater power, if she were to take the One Ring for herself. Even if she means to set up Aragorn as king and overthrow the gates of Mordor and overthrow all the armies. Like, she would have the best army. She would have the best generals, of course. She would have the best of everything. But of course, she would become truly great and truly powerful and truly beautiful, but also evil. She would be in place of the Dark Lord. She, as the famous line goes, in place of a Dark Lord, you would have a queen. And so we already understand as a reader the power she already has resting in her, but also the potential she could have if she were to have the One Ring. Now, people could argue saying, well, the One Ring would have made Samwise Gamgee very powerful. So it is true. It would have made Gollum powerful. Now, we do see the whittling down of Gollum and his spirit. So, of course, the ring's influence and power would, amplify Galadriel's power. But we should be aware, too, that she has immense power. And then finally, in the last days, when Sauron himself is overthrown and the ring is consumed by the fires of Mount Doom, she single-handedly breaks down all the barriers of Dol Guldur, the remaining fortress that of the north, of Sauron's fortress and influence. The evil influence. There's no longer any of those spiders and goblins and stuff like that, because she has laid bare, single-handedly laid bare by her own immense power, strips down an entire fortress of evil. Well, that's a lot. That's more than what a sword can do. So, like, oh wow, she's going toe to toe with the troll. Well, so what? That's not as impressive as handedly tearing down a fortress. Now, she's with her husband. She's with her husband, who's leading the charge to just purge, what evil remains in Mirkwood, I think. But she's also, Saruman's not there. Gandalf is, of course, with Aragorn. This is her, magic, as it were, in his universe, in Tolkien's universe. So saying in the Second Age earlier, or in the form of this adaptation that is the Rings of Power, saying, well, without my sword, what would I be? I'm like, well, you can't really use a sword unless it's an uber powerful sword. You can't use it to chisel down this mighty fortress of evil. So it is demonstrating as a disservice the absence of her already immense power. Now, even if she isn't as powerful by this point, in the Second Age, well, okay, let me backtrack. In the Third Age, she has the power of Nenya, the Ring of Adamant, or water. So she is, with that, her abilities are amplified. She does not have Nenya all of her life. In fact, I don't think she has Nenya. Is it the First Age? I can't remember when the Rings of Power were forged. So it's not in the Year of the Trees. It's not in her youth, but she still is strong. In fact, I can't remember the name given her, but her mother gives her a name, an elven name, that means man maiden, because she's so tall and strong. And so, yeah, okay, you're talking about physical stature then. Again, all things considered, leading up to the point where she has Nenya getting into the Third Age, she's pretty powerful. Now, I think it is said that, it's like Gandalf. Besides seeing Gandalf with his fireworks, the public really, they don't really, they understand the prestige of Gandalf. They understand he is important and he has sorcery of some kind, whether they are suspicious of it or they are for it. But Gandalf doesn't, unless it's with the Witch King or some very pressing thing that happens, or with Saruman himself. Unless it's a very pressing scenario. He does not demonstrate his full power. We see him demonstrating his full power when he draws, Saruman from Theoden, like poison is drawn from a wound. But we'll see some demonstrations of his power. But people, whether in the Shire or even in Gondor, they don't really see what exactly he is capable of. And I think I had heard that Galadriel is the same. You can see she is powerful, but she doesn't demonstrate her power loosely or frequently. It's a rare event. So maybe the power dynamics, the power level of Galadriel is different from the year of the trees and the first age and the second age. I'm not sure, but all that to say is she is more than a sword. She has immense power, and that is demonstrated to a climax at the end of the War of the Ring in the Third Age. All right, let's see where we are in my notes. Okay. So just as a recap of those things, the two things that provide a huge disservice with saying she has to have a sword in her hand is she's reduced to mortality, and there is an absence of immense power that she would have, or at least eventually have. And maybe Rings of Power might explore that. We'll see. I don't think so. If they're placing such great emphasis on, you gotta have a sword in your hand, Galadriel, I don't think they're going to place any emphasis and importance on her other abilities. But let's move on to something beautiful about Galadriel, something that is very, very virtuous, something that is, I would say, inspiring, should really inspire women, but also people who would like to demonstrate virtue in their own way. Let's talk about Galadriel now with the power of Nenya, the Ring of Adamant, the Ring of Water. With Nenya, she, by her own designs and her own character and her own heart and her own ability, she has the power to preserve life and to preserve the good. This is best demonstrated with Lothlorien, her domain of the Third Age. So Lothlorien is it's visited by the Fellowship. It's a place of height and magnitude and gold and song. And what's very, very special about Lothlorien is the preservation of what had been the past, what had been beautiful about the past, what had been significant about the past, maybe even as far as the past in the West, where Arda is and the Valar are. But Lothlorien is a place of like this just elven reverence of things that were, because about the Third Age, we actually start Lord of the Rings with the Hobbits, which is more of an English countryside. The Shire and Hobbiton in particular is English countryside. It really is, and even with the Hobbit holes and even with Gandalf's fireworks, it is an example of the mundane. It's an example of what's going to happen in the Fourth Age, where the magic goes away, where any signs of elvish influence, and the magic and the good magic, really die away because the Rings of Power are no more, and Galadriel set sail to the west with Gandalf and Frodo and Bilbo. Celeborn actually is really one of the last elves to set sail for the west, and then when he goes, the elven influence, the magic really does disappear, even with Arwen as Aragorn's wife. And with the Third Age, we see history. We see a history of things that were, like the great tales and the great lore and the great songs and the great feasts and the great halls of the past. With Lothlorien, however, that's encapsulated in time. It's like it's locked in stasis as if you were in the past. That's the magic of Galadriel's preservation of time. In Lothlorien, that land does not suffer the effects of the passage of time. What are those effects? That's age and decay. Things do not age when the presence of the lady and her ring of power, if the presence is there. So as long as Galadriel is there with the ring of power, with Nenya, the preservation of life that was beautiful, life that was of song, life of the golden trees, life of light of the past, that is actually preserved in stasis in Lothlorien during the times of the Fellowship. And then when the Fellowship leave, there's this weighing down of everyone's heart. It's like they know they have to go, and they weren't. I mean, I think it's even expressed in the Fellowship where they don't feel like they should be there in Lothlorien, even though they love the rest and stuff like that. They know they have to continue on with their mission, but there's a weight carrying with them as they leave, because they're leaving what was preserved, and that was life, light, and the good. So Galadriel, by her own abilities, because of her character and because of her design, she actually can preserve while Sauron is at work, while his evil forces are at work, while there's a slow decay over the passage of time, she's actually able to keep the light of the past intact. So she's actually an example of preserving the good. She's an example of preserving life. Her ring of power is water. It replenishes, it restores, it heals. There's no pestilence in Lothlorien. There's only healing, there's only rest. That's a very good thing to aspire to be as a person. A person who can offer rest, a person who can offer peace, a person who can offer life and water the soul of another, a person who works to preserve the good. Like for instance, my channel is dedicated to preserving art in such a way, or at least preserving what makes good art. So that's what Galadriel is also known for, in especially in her days in the Third Age. She's a preserver of life. She is a restorer. She's a healer. And no pestilence, no evil enters Lothlorien. Evil is completely barred. The only evil that really manages to sort of get into Lothlorien is Gollum, when he sneaks, under the tree beds that the Fellowship are sleeping on and stuff like that. So imagine being a person who restores in an ever-changing world. She's a restorer and preserver of tradition. And I think tradition is important in this world. Contrary to what most people and popular culture would want you to think. All right, I have a couple more things regarding Galadriel. The next is she is a bringer of good gifts. So there's this famous scene, and actually I might read one passage because I just think it's so beautiful. I'm not going to say what, who she gives what, except for two characters. Aragorn is important, but the two characters I'm thinking of that she gives is Gimli, the dwarf, and then also Samwise Gamgee. So we'll probably start with Samwise. But just that's who she is also. She's more than a sword. She is a bringer of good gifts. So let me read, if you don't mind. I'm gonna pull a Professor Geek and just read out of the passage. Not too long, just a couple, and not even a full page. All right, so I'll start with where she's giving Samwise the gifts. The Fellowship, they're about to leave, and she is giving them boats, giving them lembas bread, giving them cloaks, for camouflage, all these good things that they need for their dangerous journey ahead. All right, so to Sam, this is where it starts. "For you, little gardener and lover of trees," she said to Sam, "I have only a small gift." She put into his hand a little box of plain gray wood, unadorned, save for a single silver rune upon the lid. "Here is set G for Galadriel," she said, "but also it may stand for garden in your tongue. In this box there is earth from my own orchard, and such blessing as Galadriel has still to bestow is upon it. It will not keep you on your road, nor defend you against any peril. But if you keep it and see your home again at last, then perhaps it may reward you. Though you should find all barren and laid waste, there will be a few gardens in Middle Earth that will bloom like your garden, if you sprinkle this earth here. Then you may remember Galadriel, and catch a glimpse far off of Lorien that you have seen only in our winter. For our spring and our summer are gone by, and they will never be seen on earth again, save in memory. Now, I'm going to go back. I'm going to come back to this for Gimli, but I wanted to demonstrate or to explain the significance of that. Now, spoilers if you haven't read the books, if you've seen only the movies, but this is pretty much common knowledge at this point, but still very important to talk about. But I think one of the most epic parts of the Fellowship, or excuse me, the Lord of the Rings, is actually toward the end, after the coronation of the king, when they all travel back home, and then Gandalf goes and parts ways with the hobbits, and he could have been really helpful, when they come to see that the Shire, particularly Hobbiton, has been overrun by ruffians, and these people, these wicked men, and also sour hobbits. They are under the command of Grima Wormtongue and ultimately Saruman, who is the chieftain of this overrunning of the Shire. And that it's there's so much to explain about that scene alone, just like how Saruman came from the spirit of Arda as the most powerful, wise magic user of Middle Earth, and then he is reduced to this thieving, conniving old man who is so smitten with vengeance against these little people called the hobbits. It's really, he's such he deserves his own character study, because he's such a fascinating, and also probably he's one of the most renowned cautionary tales, I think, in fiction. But going back to the hobbits, well, they see their home just completely, they just came out of a war. Frodo and Sam, they just came out of Shelob's lair, and Minas Morgul, and Gollum, the treachery of Gollum, and then the fires of Mount Doom. I mean, they came out of the worst of it. And then, of course, they had that, healing, the time of healing and restoration before the coronation of Aragorn and Arwen, and the coronation of the king and stuff like that. But they came through all of that to travel extensively for days on end, only to see, and with him, Samwise, Meriadoc, and Pippin, they came to see their Shire, their home, their lovely home overrun, and everything. By the time they have that battle, the epic climax of these hobbits just rallying hobbits to overtake these wicked men, and they win at a huge loss. It's a huge slaughter. It's a huge battle in terms of hobbits. Well, everything is ruined, and even the most beloved trees are ruined. Like, it just breaks out of out of the tearing down of the homes and the roads and the gates. The thing that grieved Sam the most were the trees, because he's a gardener. He's the green thumb of Hobbiton, and so he's just wrecked. And then weeks later, after all of the fiasco, it comes to him, oh, we have this gift the Lady Galadriel gave me. And actually, let me see. Again, it's going to be hopefully a short excerpt. It's just wonderful. Like, I need to read, like, the appendices, for September 2nd. Okay, so after some going back and forth with the hobbits, like the main four traveling hobbits, Sam takes care to use the soil, I think it's like silver or gray soil of Galadriel's orchard, and he tends bit by bit different places all over the Shire, but especially Hobbiton. That's his place he cherishes the most. So he's very much attentive with each and every grain of that little box. And then the Malorn seed, the silver Malorn seed, I think it's silver, even though it's a gold tree, I think, that actually is planted where the party tree was, where Bilbo gave his birthday speech. Because the party tree was the community. It was the community center of all the hobbits. And so that was destroyed. And so in place of it, Sam plants the actual seed that was in the box that Galadriel gave him. So I'll just read just a couple paragraphs. So this is after Sam plants and then waits during the winter. Spring surpassed his wildest hopes. His trees began to sprout and grow, as if time was in a hurry and wished to make 1 year do for 20. In the party field, a young sapling leaped up. It had silver bark and long leaves, and burst into golden flowers in April. It was indeed a Malorn, and it was the wonder of the neighborhood. In after years, as it grew in grace and beauty, it was known far and wide, and people would come long journeys to see it. The only Malorn west of the mountains and east of the sea, and one of the finest in the world. Altogether, 1420 in the Shire was a marvelous year. Not only was there a wonderful sunshine and delicious rain, in due times and perfect measure, but there seemed something more, an air of richness and growth, and a gleam of a beauty beyond that of mortal summers that flicker and pass upon this middle earth. All the children born or begotten in that year, and there were many, were fair to see and strong, and most of them had a rich golden hair that had before been rare among the hobbits. The fruit was so plentiful that young hobbits very nearly bathed in strawberries and cream, and later they sat on the lawns under the plum trees and ate until they had made piles of stones like small pyramids, or the heaped skulls of a conqueror, and they had moved on. So hobbit kids playing. And no one was ill, and everyone was pleased, except those who had to mow the grass. So it's this time after just tragedy and pestilence and being overrun by evil people. The Shire and the Hobbiton see an amazing, extraordinary spring, and that was due to the gift that Galadriel gave Samwise at the start of their journey, before all that had taken place. So again, with Samwise, and with all of them, but particularly with something very special with Samwise, Galadriel is the bringer of good gifts. So just imagine, that to aspire to be like that. It doesn't have to be money, it doesn't have to be items, but just something that is really, special to different people. If they're a gardener, maybe help till their land. So that's Samwise. Next is Gimli. So just talking about Samwise and Gimli. So I love this. I'm going to take a swig of water for this. Actually, yes. Dread Pirate Bramando, welcome. I haven't seen you before. Lotus Eaters, yes. What's his name? John. He's no longer there. I miss him. He could do an audiobook, but he actually did an extensive study. You're right. Actually, he did. He did a good talk on. He did a good video essay on Saruman. Good call. Let's see. Okay, so I love this. I love this exchange between Galadriel and Gimli. Of course, it's very, very famous, but I just have to read it. Okay, so. And what gift would a dwarf ask of the elves? Said Galadriel, turning to Gimli. None, lady, answered Gimli. It is enough for me to have seen the Lady of the Galadrim and to have heard her gentle words. Hear, all ye elves, she cried to those about her. Let none say again that dwarves are grasping and ungracious. Yet surely, Gimli, son of Gloin, you desire something that I could give. Name it, I bid you. You shall not be the only guest without a gift. There's nothing, lady, Galadriel, said Gimli, bowing low and stammering. Nothing, unless it is permitted to ask. Nay, to name a single strand of your hair which surpasses the gold of the earth, as the stars surpass the gems of the mine. I do not ask for such a gift, but you commanded me to name my desire. The elves stirred and murmured with astonishment, and Celeborn, her husband, gazed at the dwarf in wonder, but the lady smiled. It is said that the skill of the dwarves is in their hands rather than in their tongues, she said. Yet that is not true of Gimli. For none have I love this, I love how she says it. For none have ever made to me a request so bold and yet so courteous. And how shall I refuse, since I commanded him to speak? But tell me, what would you do with such a gift? Treasure it, lady, he said, in memory of your words to me at our first meeting. And if I ever return to the smithies of my home, it shall be set in an imperishable crystal, to be an heirloom of my house, and a pledge of goodwill between the mountain and the wood until the end of days. So it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful exchange between the lady of the elves and Gimli, son of Gloin. Of course, this signifies a couple things. First, obviously, the most obvious is it signifies a unity between elves and dwarves. You know, the two races that really had this mutual animosity toward one another, even back in the ancient days, for different reasons concerning the mythology. And so this courtesy of Gimli, this absolute admiration, he's just stunned by her beauty and her grace, and all prejudice, all suspicions, all prejudice of her is completely dissolved, you know, before his stay. And then when he's finally about to depart with the fellowship, he's grieved. He it's kind of like you could say he's in love with her. I think that could be easily argued. But if not that, he has absolute reverence for her grace and her light and her goodness. And that fosters the most important, besides Frodo and Sam, I think the friendship of Legolas and Gimli is really one of the most important relationships in at least in the Lord of the Rings, if not all of Middle Earth. It signifies a unity between what was very divisive in the race of elves and dwarves. That's the first thing. Now, interestingly enough, when her giving him the strands of hair is very, very important, and I didn't realize this. Until you know the history of the Silmarillion, you don't really think about this, but her giving her 3 strands of her hair to him is very, very important, because the elf, one of the greatest, mightiest elves of the years of the trees and of the first age, Feanor, who created the Silmarils. The Silmarils, of course, are the crux of the whole mythology of the Silmarillion, sort of, but yeah. Anyway, so he's this Feanor elf is like the mightiest of the Noldor. He's got a spirit of fire. In fact, actually, when he was born, he consumed the energy of his mother, who passed on from sheer exhaustion. He has just think of like the highest order of kings, but with arrogance. He's a very proud, prideful, highly one of the greatest craftsmen of elves of all time, but highly prideful. And Feanor, oh gosh, I think he's like as far as kin is concerned, he's like an uncle to Galadriel. I think, if I remember correctly. Well, he is smitten. He's very much inspired by the beauty of her hair. Now, we do see in a lot of concept art, and then also a lot of like the movies, we see her hair being gold, and it does depict her hair coming from the light of Laurelin, meshed with gold. Eleanor, Samwise daughter, has gold hair from the Malorn. Her dominion, Galadriel's dominion, is gold, and so we think her hair is gold, but actually, at least in the ancient days, her hair was meshed with gold and silver. And it was beautiful. It inspired Feanor to craft these something that would partake of the light of the trees of Valinor. And he asked for 1 strand of hair, and actually Gimli too. So Gimli the dwarf, humbled, asks for a strand of her hair. With Feanor, the high king at that time, or supposed king of the elves of Arda, of the Noldor, he asks for one strand of her hair, and she refuses. And he asks 2 more times, so a total of 3 times, and she rejects him. And then there's contention between them from then on, because she perceived a sinister. Before he goes outright revolting against the gods, he goes sinister, or she perceives something sinister about him. So one of the highest elves of history, the mightiest craftsman, a mighty warrior, and skilled in tongue, and also I think he created like runes or something, or the written language of one of the elven languages. And she says no to him. But she gives not one strand to Gimli, but 3. That's pretty cool. And so I just wanted to say that she is the bringer of good gifts. So in response to the trailer, what am I without my sword? You're a lot. You're more than a sword. And then finally, we'll get back into the chat. But one final thing is, she is very strong-willed in a good way, and that is best demonstrated in the temptation of the One Ring. So the One Ring, she believes she can, resolve all this conflict of all these centuries with Sauron, her enemy. She, besides Gandalf, she's really the one living threat to Sauron. And so if she had possession of the ring, she could overthrow Sauron probably instantaneously. And the hobbits can go home. They don't have to see the dangers ahead. Aragorn can preemptively be king and then replace the steward of Gondor. But she says no. She says no. And that is a beautiful thing, where she resists power. She's still very powerful, but she resists the wrong power, or the omnipotent power. She resists the power to overthrow the Dark Lord, knowing full well that she would replace him. And that ensues her ultimate redemption with the West, and so she can sail. And then, as the War of the Ring concludes, as the One Ring is consumed, Nenya, her ring, loses power. That the final preservation of Lothlorien, very slowly, but slowly, it decays to a normal wooded area. The commencement of the Fourth Age really is the world of men, the race of men. The mundane that we kind of see with the Shire, with Hobbiton, it's really the last curtain to be rolled back, and the last of what we see of the elven influence. But that is true power, when you actually can resist power, knowing that it would ultimately corrupt you. So as just a recap, and then we'll get back into the chat. Thanks, that was a long lecture, but as a recap, who am I? Or what was the question? What's the question? Without my sword, what would I be? You would be a lot. First of all, you're not reduced to mortality. You're far distinguished from the race of men. That's the first thing, and you don't need a sword to do that, or to be that. You have immense power, Galadriel, which you will see manifested with Nenya and with your good deeds. You can cast you can expel the presence of Sauron of his northern fortress, and ultimately single-handedly bring down the fortresses of his dominion in Mirkwood at the end of the War of the Ring, Dol Guldur, if I said that right. You have the ability to preserve life and light, and preserve the good. Even time in your dominion will have no effect on your dominion. Or I meant to say, time will have no effect on your dominion. Decay, age, for as long as you have the power of Nenya, will have no effect on your dominion. So you can preserve that. You are a bringer of very good gifts. The Shire is wonderful because of your orchard, the grain, the seed, the soil of your orchard, and the Malorn tree. And then you've also really commenced a peace and unity between dwarves and elves. There's no the animosity between them has waned, especially signified by the friendship of Gimli and Legolas. And one last thing too that I forgot to mention, when Gimli is very, very old, like years down the road, at the death of the king, King Aragorn, Gimli himself is very old, and because I think Aragorn has been preserved with long life, Gimli is an old man by this point, and Legolas is with Gimli. He's there at his side, but still wanting. He's wanted for years to go to the west, to sail to the west, and he's grieved at the prospect of leaving. I think it's spelled out. I can't remember. I can't remember, but he would be grieved to leave Gimli, so of course he would stay until Gimli passes away. But it is said that I think in the appendices that Gimli is he is given the grace, and I think it is the grace of Galadriel from the west, given the grace to sail with Legolas to the Undying Lands. He is the first and only dwarf to be able to do that. So again, she's the bringer of great gifts and grace. So that's it. Let's go back to the chat. 1 second. My hair is feeling a little sticky, so I'm gonna turn on my camera or off my camera, comb it out because it's nice and hot. And then let's go ahead and get back to the chat. Hopefully the video wasn't fuzzy either. I'll turn on the camera in just a second, but let's go ahead and welcome let's see who else is here. Jacob, I don't think I welcomed you, but welcome. Dr. Wise in the house. Schooner Tuna is also in the house. Yeah, all right. Okay, so I'm going to move up on the chat. Now, again, I'm only on StreamYard, so sometimes StreamYard does skip some YouTube comments. Welcome, Zetopia, also. KR says, it might depend on culture and setting regarding women and swords, but I'm pretty sure elven women had more power aside from swords in Lord of the Rings. I mean, their power was like some of the more powerful elven women were the restorers of earth. Like they were the restorers of nature, natural dominion. They befriended good noble beasts, like good noble hounds, like Luthien with Huan, the hound, the noble hound. They were partakers of restoring nature or preserving nature or healing nature, which is totally fine. I mean, if I had that ability, I would do that. I mean, I know it's not a superpower, but like if I was given any like supernatural ability, like someone, saying, hey, if you had any like to better the world, to help people, what kind of special ability would you have? Honestly, even for me, because I would want this. I would want to be a bearer of peace. So what that means is either my words or my presence or my abilities would just totally remove anxiety and chronic depression and mental ailments, that really plague the heart. That would be an amazing ability. I would love to have that ability. I think what was it? Guardians of the Galaxy. I can't remember that alien girl's name, but she had the empathy trait or whatever. That'd be kind of cool. Oh, Matthew Flynn is in the house. Welcome. Sound Engraver, it's almost as if the world is called Morgoth's Ring for a reason. I'm not sure where that reference is, but yeah, I could agree with that. Don't kill if you can wound, don't wound. Oh yeah, yeah. I was like, this quote sounded familiar, and then I looked down who it is. I love this quote. This is so important. Don't kill if you can wound. Don't wound if you can subdue. Don't subdue if you can pacify, and don't raise your hand at all until you've first extended it. It's like yeah. Prof concurs. It's wonderful. He's had that too. He's had a picture of her with that quote up. It's wonderful. Just so good. Yeah. To be honest, I associate elves more with staffs, spears, and bows. Kind of me too. It's not. I mean, it's yeah. Even Gilgalad had a spear. I don't think he fought with a sword. I can't remember. Morgoth is defeated. If it's the second age, if he's banned, if he's thrown into the void, I think his going to the void marks the ending of the first age. I think Sauron really is the ultimate villain of the second age, if I had that right. I think the last war against Morgoth, and he's bound for the void, I think marks the end of the second age. Oh, whoa, Big Al. Sauron finished them around second age 15. Oh, wait a sec. I think he's answering questions for someone. Forged in the second age. Oh, to me, Rings of Power. Okay, and then your dates. Sauron finished them around the second age, 1590. Sauron extended, then created the One Ring, 1600. I knew 1600 was the forging of the One Ring. Yeah, got to rely on Big Al for the trivia stuff. Yeah, and just to conclude, the the Gladiator of Cone. Yes, Sauron became the new Dark Lord right after Melkor Morgoth was banished. Yeah. Grant Lorraine, welcome. When a studio says that something must be retold to represent modern standards, that's the biggest red flag. By the way, it would not be this Sunday because Prof and I are going on a little wonderful road trip this Sunday, but maybe next Sunday, if I do a short stream, I would know what to do. I might look into it because I would have to know about it more before I announced it. But I came across this chair of Tolkien Society, this guy who his whole when people were saying, aren't you worried, that Amazon Rings of Power will be a terrible interpretation? Like basically the article started with the question, does it matter that Tolkien, or does it matter what Tolkien would think of Rings of Power? When you have an opinionated piece that starts with that as the headline, you got a problem. And I was reading down the answer of this chair of the Tolkien Society, who does not look like a Tolkien fan at all. Just saying. But anyway, his answers were some of the, like, I had never seen so many straw mans. I shouldn't say straw man. I don't want to use that word loosely. But people these days who really don't, who try to, when you're asked a really important question that really calls for an important answer, whether that's going to be controversial. Let's see. We there? Oh no. Let's see. Can you guys hear me? I saw myself freeze. Okay. I'm gonna do my camera again. Load it up. But anyway, what was I saying? When people ask a very direct political question, a lot of these people who are these ideologues who are not going to honor Tolkien, for instance, they dance around the answer. They dance around being direct. And when they're given a direct question that requires a direct answer, some people circumvent it by saying, why would you ask it like this? And this chair of the Tolkien Society really, oh good, thank you. This chair of the Tolkien Society, he had so many bad examples to answer the question, does it really matter what Tolkien would think of Rings of Power? Like, he would say things, I don't he would have to prove to me Tolkien said as much. He didn't cite anything. He didn't have any little footnotes or any quotes and say, hey, go to this reference. He didn't share any letters of Tolkien. He just danced around it. He basically said, well, Tolkien was fine. I might talk about this. It's like, it doesn't really matter if we're not completely, exactly faithful to what Tolkien would want of the Second Age, because he was pretty loose with his interpretation of things like Beowulf. It's like, you can't compare Beowulf to Lord of the Rings. Not even Lord of the Rings of the Second Age or Middle Earth of the Second Age. The history of Beowulf, and as far as the text, is very old. The translation from Old English, I think at least from Old English, but maybe it was Middle English. Prof would know. Big Al would know. I don't know the history of Beowulf like I should. But he was comparing, like, well, we have different interpretations of Beowulf, and Tolkien would have been fine with in different interpretations of Beowulf. It's like, yeah, but Beowulf, the text of Beowulf is very different from not just Lord of the Rings, not just The Hobbit, but anthologies, the Silmarillion, the Unfinished Tales. Like, we have a lot to go on if we're going to adapt faithfully to what Tolkien wants. Anyway, Cody Sparks, welcome. Nice to meet you. All right, let me go up a little bit, and then I promise I'll get through the chat. I'll get through the chat. Oh, good team. Go Team Ghost Planet forever. Good to see you. Short guy always into tall chicks. Well, Gimli doesn't really have like a lot of optimal options, as a dwarf. Anyway, let's see. Scrolling down. Welcome, Midwit Productions. Yes, fair comparison. Amazon is going to destroy Lord of the Rings like Disney destroyed Star Wars. Yeah, the thing is, the one disadvantage about Lord of the Rings compared to Star Wars is the maker is no longer with us and his son is no longer with us. And then we have this Tolkien Society that is like saying, what the chair of the Tolkien Society said? And I'm going to say, I swear I'll have a separate stream on this. He said, I think it's my endeavor, it's my responsibility to reach new audiences. Now let's just dwell on that for a little bit. Let it sink in. He wants to use Lord of the Rings and the stories of Middle Earth to reach new audiences. That is the grossest lack of self-awareness I have ever, not self-awareness, but the lack of awareness, lack of cognition even. Lord of the Rings is probably the most read books globally, like internationally. I think I heard, now this was years ago I heard it, so it could have changed now. Maybe Harry Potter is more widely read than Lord of the Rings now. But at one time, it was the second most read series of books next to the Bible, next to the book of the Bible. Above every single story on the face of the earth, Tolkien doesn't need to reach new audiences. Tolkien will always have new audiences from generation to generation. Because good storytelling sticks. Yeah. Very nice. Nenya business. Galadriel, what are you doing over there? Where are you traveling to? Nenya business. Yes. Nordic, the languages were Welsh and Finnish for the elves. Yeah. Tolkien wrote that it would be strange indeed that any dwarf should be willing to leave Middle-earth for any love, or that the elder should receive him. Oh, continued. Or that the lords of the West should permit it. But it is said that Gimli went not only because of his great friendship with Legolas, but there was also out of that desire to see again the beauty of Galadriel. I know, it's so sweet. Like, I think it's so sweet. Can you imagine, though, Celeborn, like, coming upon Arda? I was like, my dear love. And I was like, what is he doing here? Like, I'm glad he likes you, but, like, no, I'm sure it's a pure relationship. All right. Yeah, I mean, Dr. Y, this was his whole life. Now the thing is, he's also inspirational. He did not. I don't think he released the Fellowship of the Ring until he was 62 years old. I heard that a long time ago. So if you guys feel like, oh man, I'm approaching 30, I'm approaching 25, like I'm approaching this age. I don't know. I think it's too late for me. No, Tolkien did not release the Lord of the Rings until I think it was 62 or 62 or 52. I think it was 62. He was an Oxford professor, so he had a life. He had a wife and he had children. But yeah, he that his masterpiece was released when he was in his 60s. I think you can reach new audiences by simply being faithful to the original material. The movies did that, and they're so beloved by all. I mean, not only that, even if you never had an adaptation, even if you never had a film adaptation, the books would still be read. This this really weird notion that people think it's their mission to reach new audiences. It's like with the whole thing with Star Wars. It's like, oh, it's important that we reach a new generation of people. It's like Star Wars will always, if you leave it alone. That's the thing. These people never bothered to think that they should leave it alone. If they left just the original trilogy, prequels, maybe a cartoon here and there, if they just left it alone, it would still be picked up by future generations. The books of Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, even the Silmarillion. And if you love the Silmarillion, then you would get the Children of Hurin, and then you'd get the anthologies, and then you'd get the unfinished tales. You'd get all the books if you loved it. And yeah, it's weird. Lord of the Rings is heavily based on many types of mythologies and Anglo-Saxon stories. It is so hard to make. It is so hard to make a connection to. Oh, is it so hard to make a connection? Yeah. Well, not if you want to reach new audiences. And I'm saying that sardonically. And I think that's true too. Truth be told, Tolkien would have hated every film adaptation of his books. He was very much famous for not giving rights to anyone because at his time he could not even fathom a justifiable adaptation. And it was so understandable to think that because his lore and his world building and the density of his book, his stories would have been a really hard task. The time he was alive to say that, I think was like in the 60s or whatever, and it's like, yeah, it wouldn't have worked in the 60s. The only way it would have worked possibly would be like a 60s television show, and that's it. Wait, Private Eye, are you just kind of confirming what I said? That's literally what Star Wars did. Or is it because you can't make a connection to them because of your laziness? Either way, it's stupid. Connection to these older mythologies? Yeah. The aesthetics of Rings of Power don't look right. Like I said it before, and people kind of like butted heads with me at one point where like the dress of the Numenorians isn't right. The world building looks a lot more like almost Roman civilization, Mediterranean. It look like if you go on a set not knowing that it's anything to do with Middle Earth or the world of Lord of the Rings, people might actually mistake it for a civilization of this world. And it's got to be like there's so much concept art out there. There's so much gorgeous, gorgeous concept art of the world of Middle Earth and Arda and Paradise and the Valar and the elves and stuff like that that you can be incredibly inspired by. Like if I were given the keys to the city, if Amazon said I was to be put in charge with doing an adaptation of an event in the Second Age, or if they made me do Numenor, oh my goodness! Like I would make sure Numenor was a thing out of majesty. Anyway, but I've talked about that. Oh, was there was something? Yeah, maybe I had heard that. Making a literal motion comics in the 60s about the Hobbit. The story is hilarious. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, when I say animation, like they would have to do it well. Like I'm not saying do an animation in the 60s. We can't because you can. No, you'd have to do it in a it'd have to be like honestly, like Rankin and Bass. Like an animation show in the 80s, like in the late 70s and 80s with Rankin and Bass. I think that could have been a faithful adaptation. Yeah, Cody Sparks, I agree with you. A cool avatar. It looks like your standard generic fantasy world. Anyone can mistake it for something like Narnia instead of actual Middle Earth. Yeah, Middle Earth has a real distinct look to it. And there's so much art out there that shows that. Wait, it was supposed to be a movie and it was done in a week? The man who was ordered to make it had to pay people to go see it so so that the scammer could keep the rights a little more interesting. Oh, that's terrible. That's a sad story or inconvenient story. 10 minutes? No. No, that's not an idea I'm thinking, and Tolkien would have been right to say that. Okay, so I think I did catch up with the chat. I'm sorry, I'm on StreamYard, so I might have missed some. Oh, Midway, you have something. Let's see. The whole idea of new audiences is solely a result of a small group of people who view incredibly superficial traits as virtuous. So universal stories have to be changed to align with their ideals. Well, the biggest problem with that is that it dates the production. It dates the story. Because people 20 years from now are not going to understand the significance of why this is so important. They'll completely miss it. The thing is, these creators who put these very specific narratives, you know the drill. They're putting very specific ideological narratives in their stories that is going to go over the heads of people 20 years from now. I'm giving it 10 years from now, guys. I know we see so much chaos and disorder in the world, and I know you think it never ends. We thought the world thought it would end in 2020 at the end of at the beginning of 2021. I'm giving it no more than 10 years for all the ridiculous movements that we see. I'm giving it 10 years. And then after 10 years, oh, now I'm back. I see myself black out, so I'm sure it's fine. I'll just talk like it's normal. You missed my comment. Oh, sorry. Oh, Matthew Flynn. Sometimes StreamYard doesn't get all the comments. What did I say? Oh, Morgoth rings. Morgoth's rings refer to his corruption of the world itself, while Sauron's ring of corruption rings corruption of men. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a very interesting parallel. Yeah, very good. What was I saying though? I can't remember. I think I was saying something. Yeah. Oh, after 10 years, what? Okay, so thank you. So of all the political shenanigans that we see and we think it's going to be endless, it's never going to go away, I think in 10 years, these movements are going to pass away. They're going to die. These are trends. I know a lot of people feel strongly about the trends to a point where they want to change the world with these trends, but these ideological, like in your face, you got to put X, Y, and Z in this show, whatever. This is going to go away in 10 years. I hope sooner, but I do not see it. I do not see these stupid creative choices exceeding 10 years. I think we'll come over the hump, and then people 25 years from now or 30 years from now, they're gonna look back on Rings. They're not gonna even look back on Rings of Power. They're gonna forget about it, or if it does come up, it's gonna look like, what did he mean by that? Because it's gonna go over their heads anyway. So that is Galadriel. I hope you like that. I hope you like that lecture. I hope so. If it's not going to be tamer, it's going to be a different kind of chaos that we have to face. But hopefully we'll be more unified by that time. So as an inspiration, be like Galadriel, someone who is a bringer of good news and good gifts, and someone who gives you peace and reconciliation and all that good stuff. Because a sword brings division, doesn't it? Anyway, so I think that's everything for me. What is going on with my channel this week? I think I will do. I think I'm going to make a small announcement on SuperCollider. So just a video for SuperCollider. I do have a promo video I have to work on in the next few weeks. I'd like to do a short stream, not this weekend, but maybe next weekend. So I might do two streams in the following week. A shorter Sunday stream within the week or so, or 2 weeks or so. On I want to do a little bit more research on the Tolkien Society, because it looks like it's really I've seen signs. It's very much anti-Tolkien. Maybe I'll talk about it next Monday. It looks crazy. Like it's set to dismantle who this man is, what his legacy is, and stuff like that. Oh yeah, thank you. Loved your ASMR. That was I really enjoyed making that. I was proud of it. There were some audio choices that I'll fix in a future project if I do that. Now I don't plan on doing ASMR on my channel. I understand the benefits of ASMR. I love soft-spoken voice. Soft-spoken voice is my favorite, and counting, you have me relaxed. I could have the most stressful day, and if someone like counts delicately with soft-spoken voice, that's why I did what I did with my video, my 5-minute ASMR video with headphones. But I do sometime in the future, I don't know how far into the future, but sometime in the future, I would like to compose ambient music for sleep and incorporate either pink noise or brown noise. White noise works, but it is a little harsher than pink noise. So I would love to do like a long album, like just a mono track of like 40 minutes or whatever of just, ambient music, it just as just one thing to play through. That's always been on my mind to do. So not specifically ASMR, but definitely some music for sleep. So a little bit of SuperCollider stuff as far as announcements. Maybe even a short original music video to show you what I'm doing. I would like to release a track this September. I need to. So that's looking like that. Next week, I might talk about the Tolkien Society next week, because I think there are some things to talk about. But I might talk more about science fiction next week. And if I do, I would like to talk about how to write an enigma who is a person. Like what goes into a good enigma, whether that's an idea or a person. And I might use a very specific character out of the Foundation trilogy by Asimov. So anyway, I think that's everything for now. I thank you guys so much for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed that. More talking about preserving what is good in art. But until I see you next, keep producing, keep preserving, and of course, keep promoting the good art you love. And I will catch you later. Thanks again.